She slapped a $600 violation on my fence the morning I scattered my wife's ashes, didn't even look up from her clipboard. Tolland Mercer, retired wildlife biologist, Wickery Hollow, North Carolina. The folded permit was taped inside our old recipe book next to Addie's cornbread. They had it in their hands the whole time. Ever had someone pull rank on the wrong day, in the wrong place? They didn't knock. Just pulled up in a dull gray SUV, doors thudding shut like judges' gavels, and stood there, clipboards in hand, HOA, polos, crisp and tucked. 2 men and 1 woman, none I recognized. They didn't smile, didn't wave, just started taking pictures of the east fence line like it had mugged someone in plain daylight. I watched from behind the screen door, coffee cooling in my hand. The air still held that late winter hush soft mud underfoot, distant woodpecker tapping out his claim. And there they were, trampling moss, pointing at the cedar posts I'd sunk myself 3 years ago. I didn't go out, didn't want to give them the satisfaction of drama. They left as they came, silent, precise, uninvited. I stepped onto the porch after the SUV rolled off, boots landing heavy on the warped planks. My breath fogged in the morning chill. Down at the base of the fence, tucked where the path dipped toward the old game trail, I noticed something new. The wooden wildlife corridor. Do not enter sign. Addie had painted back in 2016. Face down in the mud. That sign had hung there proudly crooked ever since she roped it to the gatepost. I crouched and turned it over. The paint had faded to ghost gray. A crack split the corner. I brushed off the dirt and leaned it against the fence for now. Rue would notice it later, I figured. That boy sees things most don't. By noon, the mail came. Not the usual grocery circulars or VA newsletter. A plain white envelope from Wickery Hollow HOA with my name printed in stern block letters. Inside, a notice of violation. You are hereby given 15 calendar days to remove the unauthorized perimeter structure hereafter referred to as fence, located on the east boundary of Parcel 7A. Non-compliance may result in fines not to exceed $500 per week. I read it twice slower the second time. Unauthorized. As if the fence had sprouted on its own. As if I'd never spent that humid June hammering in posts, measuring spacing, running mesh that wouldn't cut a deer's legs. As if the dozen emails with Wildlife Services meant nothing. I went inside and pulled the binder from the bottom file drawer. Brown leather cracked at the corners. Addie's label still hung from the tab WH Corridor Project, 2016 to 18. Her handwriting straight and tall. I opened to the page marked with a red ribbon her original sketch of the layout. She'd even shaded in the edge habitat buffer zones, noting where the hogs had last nested. She always said the forest didn't end at the fence line. It seeped, bled, needed room to breathe. There was an old printed email stapled behind that drawing, dated March 12, 2018, from ncarolina.wildlife@nc. Gov. Subject Boar Activity. Wickery Ridge. Boundary status. Your proposed fencing layout aligns with our conservation guidelines as long as the wildlife corridor remains accessible. No objections noted. That was permission. Maybe not HOA permission. But Addie said it best. The deer don't answer to committees. I looked around our cabin, wood-paneled walls still smelling faintly of the lemon oil she used on Sundays. I pinned the violation letter to the wall above the desk just beside her framed topographic map of the ridge, the same one she'd presented at the town fair in 2019. Below the fence line she'd written in pencil, "Do not disturb. Edge habitat begins." Outside, the clouds were starting to gather, bruised at the belly. Storm was coming, both kinds. I was still staring at the letter when my phone buzzed. A text from Rue. "You might want to check the east fence line. Something weird's happening." I blinked, picked up my coat, and for the first time that day I felt my hand curl not around a coffee mug but the railing. Tight. The next morning the sticker was already there. Red, crooked, slapped across my wooden gate like a warning for contaminated livestock. Notice of non-compliance. $600 fine pending. I peeled it off slowly, not because I needed to save it, but because I wanted to feel it tear. It left a faint rectangle adhesive still tacky under my thumb. The frost hadn't yet lifted off the grass when I saw Rue circling on his bike again, tires crunching softly on the gravel shoulder. He coasted to a stop near the split-rail fence across from my porch, pretended to retie his shoelace. "Hey, Mr. Mercer," he said without looking up. "You still got that wildlife permit?" Addie fought for. I met his glance. That wasn't idle curiosity in his voice. It had a hitch, something cautious behind it. "I'm pretty sure I do," I said. Buried somewhere in her chaos system. He gave a small nod, stood, and rolled away before I could ask more. By lunch, I was at the table with my laptop open and a legal pad to the side. The library-turned-HOA office had a website now clunky but passable. I clicked through to the bylaws. Section 3.2. Wildlife Protection Exception. I underlined the phrase, "Fencing erected for the documented prevention of wildlife intrusion may be exempt from perimeter regulations pending prior notification." Addie had notified them. I remembered the meeting. She'd worn her green jacket, the one with the faded Save the Elk patch, and carried a folder thick with printouts. I began to draft a letter. Not a rant, not a threat, just a quiet, clear reminder to whom it may concern, in reference to Violation 7A. The fencing in question falls under Section 3.2 of the Wickery Hollow Covenant regarding wildlife protection. Please find attached a PDF of my original email sent to Wildlife Services and a sitemap dated March 2018. I await your confirmation of exemption status. Respectfully, Tolland Mercer. I attached what I had scanned images from Addie's binder, her sketches, and a photo of the sign before it fell. Then I hit send, and requested delivery confirmation. It pinged back as delivered, 2:13 p.m. I waited. 2 days. Nothing. On the third morning, a new envelope arrived. This one had a faint embossing of the HOA crest, a silhouette of a pine cone inside a gear. Inside, a new notice. Same boilerplate font, same wording. But this one had a signature. Eileen Casterbridge, President. That was the first time I saw her name attached. Addie had called her a clipboard with heels after one meeting. I hadn't thought much of it then. That night, I pulled Addie's old cookbooks off the shelf. Not for comfort, for suspicion. If she hid the good chocolate in Southern pies and pickles, there was a fair chance something else was tucked away too. And sure enough, between pages 118 and 119 next to her pencil note on vinegar ratios was a tri-folded letter, typed. Official letterhead. Wickery Hollow Homeowners Association, dated April 2, 2018. Approval granted for temporary fence line per submitted wildlife intrusion plan, parcel 7A. Signed, Eileen Casterbridge, Secretary. So, she'd known, she'd signed, same woman, different job title, same ink, different message. I sat there a long while with both letters side by side, the old permit and the fresh violation. They matched. Same parcel number, same fence. A knock startled me. Rue again. Helmet still on. "They're gearing up for tomorrow," he said. "Saw her talking with guys from the landscaping crew. They're going to rip the whole line out by mid-morning. Eileen's driving it herself." I nodded slowly. There's a kind of clarity that comes with being underestimated, a kind that lets you move without noise, think in straight lines. Addie always said, "You don't have to roar to stand your ground. Just know where the ground ends." I closed the cookbook and slid it across the table, now 10 ounces heavier with justice. Tomorrow I'd be ready. I woke to the sound of wood breaking, not snapping like a dead branch in the forest, but splintering under pressure. Forced. Violated. My fence didn't go down quiet, it screamed. By the time I'd tugged on boots and stepped outside, the sun had barely crested the ridge. Fog still clung to the treetops. 5 men in neon vests were spread across the eastern boundary like crows on a carcass, yanking posts, sawing through mesh, tossing cedar timbers like trash. And there she was, Eileen Casterbridge, arms folded across her chest, leaning against the hood of a graphite gray SUV like a forewoman on a demolition crew. She didn't flinch when I approached, didn't smile, just nodded at the operation with the faintest purse of lips. I stopped at the edge of the gravel path, not yet on HOA-maintained land, but close enough for tension. "No notice," I said evenly. "You were already cited," she replied. Her voice was clean-clipped. This was a safety response. Safety from what quiet posts and fencing mesh unapproved, hazardous, in violation of Covenant Section 1.6, Aesthetic Harmony. And she added, "It impedes visual continuity from the ridge lookout." I wanted to laugh, but it was too early and too cold. One of the contractor's young crew cut glanced at me awkwardly before tipping a post into the back of the trailer. The sound echoed. From across the road, I caught movement in Maudine Bell's window. Second floor. Lace curtain parted. She held a cordless phone in her right hand. Didn't raise it to her ear, just watched. I stood silent as the fence I'd sunk with Addie came apart foot by foot. Behind me, Rue rolled up on his bike. No helmet this time. Just a phone in hand, already recording. He circled quietly to my left and began filming the whole scene. Eileen saw him, didn't react. When they finished, they didn't say goodbye. The contractors loaded up the last 2 posts, left a square of exposed earth where my sign had once hung, and drove off in a cloud of pine dust. Eileen stayed a beat longer. Her gaze lingered on the spot where the sign had stood. Then, without a word, she turned, slid into her SUV, and drove away. It felt colder than before. I walked the boundary line, boots squelching slightly in the wet ground. Without the fence, the edge between my land and the wild disappeared. Already I saw Prince Boar probably pressing in. Rue followed, phone still in hand. He didn't talk until we reached the far eastern corner, where a small pile of stones marked the end of the original line. "There's something under here," he said. I looked over. He was already kneeling, fingers prying at the edges of the rock pile. Underneath a rusted tin box, maybe 8 by 10 inches, banded with 2 rotted leather straps. One snapped when he lifted it. "You've seen this before?" he asked. I shook my head. He set it on a tree stump and eased the lid open. Inside, a manila folder, aged yellow, written in Addie's handwriting across the top, "Paws of Grace, Wildlife Rescue Initiative." There were printouts, letters, a faded photograph of a collie named Shepherd, and folded neatly near the back, A signed HOA waiver. I pulled it out, hands suddenly careful. Wickery, hollow. Homeowners Association. Special use. Exemption. Wildlife Management Project. Date, issued March 15, 2018. Signature, Eileen Casterbridge, Secretary, Stamp, HOA, Seal. 1194, legal, stamped, recognized. Rue looked at it over my shoulder. She signed this before she ever ran the board. "Looks that way," I said. They approved the project, officially. Then buried it. "Convenient," he murmured. At the bottom of the box was a folded map hand-drawn Addie's style. Colored zones, arrows, notations in her field script. Rue pulled it out gently. "There's a map in here," he said. "Looks like she marked nesting zones. Want me to scan it?" I nodded. "Yes. But don't email it yet. Why not?" "Because something tells me they already know it exists. I'd rather not give them time to remember where they buried the rest." He tucked the map into a sketchbook and slipped the phone into his jacket. We stood there for a while, both of us silent, the air still damp and laced with cedar dust. Later that night, I placed the waiver on my desk beneath the other letters. 3 signatures, now 2 from Eileen. Both legal, both contradictory. I opened the window just a crack, enough for the forest to breathe, and waited. "You brought paperwork," Franklin said, setting his coffee mug down with a soft thud. "Good. I brought memory." We sat in the back booth of Hollow Griddle, the town diner, with wallpaper made of Little League trophies and Polaroids. You could measure time here by the fading of the team shirts and the tilt of the old ceiling fan. The place smelled like burnt toast and bacon grease that had worked its way into the wood grain. Franklin Oak hadn't changed much. Hair thinner, sure, but his eyes, clear, slow, and unhurried, still had that lawyer's glint, the one that made people talk more than they meant to. He thumbed through the folder I handed him. The HOA permit, the wildlife exemption, the printed email from 2018. His fingers were blunt and stained from years of handling soil and briefs with equal weight. "This waiver was real," he said after a moment. "Signed while Eileen was still secretary. Stamped, recorded. It falls under open land use for wildlife mitigation." He flipped the last page and set it down gently, his coffee leaving a faint ring on the corner of the map Addie had drawn. I watched him scan the ridgeline one more time. "You know," he added, "Eileen was never a fan of land use carve-outs. Thought they set dangerous precedent." "Guess she decided to erase ours entirely," I said. Before he could answer, the waitress passed by, curly-haired mid-30s apron with too many pens. On her shirt, a faded blue logo. Pause of grace, foster, heal, release. She paused when she saw the folder. "Wait. That's Addie's old group, isn't it?" she asked, pointing to the logo on the cover. I nodded. "She helped run it until 19. I remember her, had that collie named Shepherd. Used to bring it to the fall fair with a little vest." She smiled a little too suddenly and walked off before I could thank her. Franklin leaned back. "See that memory works two ways, not just mine." Then, almost as an afterthought, he reached into his leather briefcase and produced a single envelope, aged bent, but never opened. He set it on the table between us. Addie's handwriting. Slanted, cursive, black ink. Slight smudge where she must have paused too long. The envelope read, "To be delivered. HOA, Board, Parcel 7A, Defense." "She gave this to me in 2020, he said quietly. "Asked me to mail it if things got ugly." I hesitated. "You sure you want me to read it now?" He just nodded. I opened it carefully as if the words could bruise. Inside, one page. Handwritten. Addie's voice echoed in every line. "If you're reading this, it means we failed somewhere at trust, at neighborliness, maybe at law. But I need you to know I didn't build that fence to defy anyone. I built it to hold space for what can't defend itself. You don't need to love the forest, but you need to understand that it loves you back, and you protect what loves you back. Addie." I set the page down with both hands. Franklin hadn't touched his coffee in minutes. We sat like that for a long time, watching the morning shift change tradesmen in boots, mothers in yoga pants. One old man ordering just toast and jam. All around us, laughter clink smells of cinnamon and diesel and burned eggs. Finally, I broke the silence. "I want to present everything. The footage, the documents, the waiver." Franklin nodded. "Next HOA meeting." "Yes. Then, let's make it count." He pulled another paper from his case. The master copy of the waiver. Not the photocopy Addie had saved. This one had an embossed seal chain of custody log and an appendix page with her initial sketches. I kept this as backup. "Just in case someone forgot what real approval looks like," he said. I exhaled slowly. "Thank you. That's what land lawyers do," he smiled. "We bring law into places people think are too small for it, like backyard messes." My phone buzzed. "Rue. Eileen's calling emergency HOA meeting tomorrow. Guess who's not invited?" I showed Franklin. He cracked his knuckles. "Even better." "This isn't about one man's fence," Eileen said, clicking her remote. "It's about safety and civility." The projector hummed behind her. A large, hastily mounted screen flickered to life, displaying a grainy photo of a tilled patch of land. "Suspected boar damage," read the caption. Next came a zoomed-in shot of my cedar posts, cropped tight. No context, just wood and mud taken right before they pulled it all out. She advanced the slides methodically, one click at a time. A path torn through underbrush. A child's boot next to a hoof print. Evidence, she called it. The room smelled like lemonade concentrate and folding chair vinyl. They'd set up the Wickery Hollow Community Center for spring review and safety session. But everyone knew what it really was, the HOA's stage to make a show of me. Rows of residents filled the room, half sipping coffee, half whispering. I spotted Maudie near the back, arms crossed like always. Rue stood beside her, already holding his phone camera pointed low, but recording. Karen Owens from Wildlife Services sat quietly near the side wall, a clipboard on her lap, a neutral expression set like stone. Eileen flipped to a new slide this time, showing the ridge trail. Unauthorized barriers, she said, interfere with sightlines and wildlife behavior, which puts nearby homes at risk. Mr. Mercer's fence, erected without approval, violated these principles. Her voice stayed steady, polished even. She'd practiced. I waited for her to finish, then stood. I didn't clear my throat, didn't raise my voice, just walked calmly to the front, holding the binder Franklin helped me organize. May I? Eileen hesitated. This is a board-led session. I'm a homeowner, I said, and this is a matter of record. She didn't answer, but I turned to the crowd before she could deny me. Most of you know me, I began. Or at least knew Addie. She started Paws of Grace to help rescue wildlife displaced by new developments, ours included. The fence was part of that project, not a barrier, a boundary, for safety, for the animals and for us. Rue tapped a button. The projector stuttered and switched to a different video, the takedown. 5 contractors removing posts, Eileen standing by, no posted notice, no permit withdrawal. Whispers rippled through the chairs. This was taken the morning they tore down the fence, I continued, without prior written warning, but more importantly without legal basis. I handed copies of the waiver and Addie's wildlife permit to the board table. Rue and Maudine helped pass extras through the crowd. Neighbors leaned in flipping pages. Some began to whisper to each other more pointedly now. Karen Owens cleared her throat. Eileen froze slightly. As representative of Wildlife Services, Karen began, I can confirm that Mr. Mercer's parcel borders Class II woodland, qualifying it under Conservation Clause 18A. The original permit was filed correctly in 2018, with HOA consent, including signatures. I nodded to Rue. On cue, he displayed the scanned waiver on screen, Addie's handwriting at the top, nesting zones. Watch this edge, and in the lower right corner, glowing from the projector's light. Eileen Casterbridge signature, March 15, 2018. Seal number 1194. You could have heard a pine needle fall. Eileen's arms dropped to her sides. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came. The projector's fan filled the silence. Someone in the middle row raised a hand. So, if it was legal, the woman asked slowly, why did they tear it down? Another voicemail, older, cut in. You said it was unauthorized. Someone near the back stood up, phone in hand, and announced, we're live. 32 people watching. Just FYI. Eileen stepped back. This meeting was intended to address safety concerns. Seems like we're concerned, Maudine said, her voice calm but cutting. Just not about the Boars. Chuckles. Applause, soft at first, then gaining strength. No cheers, no yelling. Just a slow, rising murmur of approval. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. I glanced back at the waiver in my hand. The paper was cool, smooth, and real. Karen Owens stood up and said, Mr. Mercer, I suggest you submit this footage and documentation to our office formally. We'll reopen the file. I will, I said. Eileen didn't speak again. She gathered her laptop and papers, her face pale in the flickering blue of the projector, and left without a closing statement. Rue came up beside me as the chairs started scraping back. She didn't expect us to bring receipts, he said. No one ever does, I replied. Then my phone buzzed again. From Eileen. Subject HOA, compliance meeting message canceled until further notice. They came again the next morning. Not with words, not with questions, with trucks. 2 white pickups nosed down the gravel like predators. A utility trailer behind one stacked with orange cones, post drivers, and bolt cutters. I stood just outside my porch, coffee still in hand. The fog was low and quiet, the kind that makes every sound seem closer than it is. Rue stood already waiting along the east fence line, hood up, phone in hand, filming, not hiding it this time. From behind the lead truck, Eileen emerged. Gloves on, clipboard tucked under her arm like a weapon. Her jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle flex from 20 yards away. "This is final removal," she called out. "Per board, consensus. No mention of court, of permits, of the map we'd projected less than 24 hours before." No shame. I didn't move. The crew began unloading tools. Rue, without looking at me, muttered quietly into his mic, "They don't care about law, only about winning." I heard him. I also heard tires on dirt softer this time. A sheriff cruiser. Navy blue. Pulled up slow from the fire trail side. Out stepped Deputy Nolan. Broad, flat-shouldered with a brow that looked naturally furrowed. He tipped his hat once, not to me, but in a general motion of acknowledgement to everyone present. Eileen turned and approached him first. "This is internal HOA work, just enforcement of aesthetic codes." Nolan pulled a folded paper from his breast pocket and glanced at me. I raised my own copy, still warm from the fax machine at Hollow Griddle, delivered just 30 minutes ago and hand-signed by a district clerk named Eddings. Cease and desist order. Emergency injunction. Parcel 7A. Wildlife mitigation area stamped. Legal. Dated today. Franklin had moved fast. "I've got an active court injunction here," I said, voice even. "Same here," Nolan added, holding up his version. "Served by county order at 7:13 a.m. He turned to Eileen. "This means no structural alteration, no object removal, no trespass without court override. You step over, I start logging every movement. Cameras on," he added, tapping the small lens on his vest. Eileen didn't say anything. Her crew shifted behind her, suddenly unsure. One of them actually put down his post-pounder. She glanced at me, not with fury this time, but something more brittle. "I'll file a response," she said quietly. Nolan didn't blink. "Do that. But today, you stay on your side of the stake." She stood for a second too long, then turned, gloves still on, and walked back to her truck without another word. The others followed. I felt a stillness settle. Not victory, not yet, but the kind of stillness that follows a line being drawn with actual ink, the kind that holds weight. Nolan stepped over and handed me a second copy. "Keep that posted," he said, "right by the trail. Laminated if you can." "I will," I said. He turned to go, then added over his shoulder, "You don't get to decide what's wild and what's yours. The state does." Rue stopped filming and exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. "That was intense," he said. I nodded, still holding the paper. The official stamp pressed slightly through to the back. Then Rue's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his brow arched. "You gotta see this." He handed it over. HOA discussion board. Wickery, Hollow residence. Eileen locked financial reports. No access to Q1 spending. Who authorized the removal contract? Wait, why were we billed for landscape alteration services last week? I read, quietly scrolling. Under the fog behind the trucks, the real unraveling had begun. Rue showed up around 9. He had a toolbox in one hand and a borrowed thermos in the other. Behind him came 7 others, some I knew by name, some only by front porch wave. "We figured it's your fence," Rue said, dropping the box with a soft thud. "But our boundary, too." I stood on the porch arms, crossed breath rising like mist. October air held that edge of bite that tells you it's time to seal windows and find the wool socks. Behind them came Maudine in her usual windbreaker and sun visor, even though the sun wasn't out. She didn't say anything, just laid a pie tin on the porch rail. On top, taped to the foil, was a folded index card. I opened it. "Let me know where to dig. M." I blinked harder than I meant to. We didn't need speeches. No one asked for permission. Just flannel sleeves, rolling up gloves, pulled tight post-hole diggers handed off like relay batons. Rue had Addie's old sketch laminated now, marked in orange where soil turned soft where runoff pooled. He'd annotated it with notes like, "Don't plant here, deer cross and bitter cress comes back fast." I hadn't realized how much of her handwriting he'd absorbed. The first post went in just before 10. The rest followed like hymn beats dig drop level pack. Repeat. No nail was perfect, no line ran straight like a contractor's. But they didn't need to. This time it wasn't to keep anything out. Just to say, here we are. Someone found the old sign. The one that had been face down in the mud months ago, Wildlife Corridor, "Do not enter." It had been cleaned, sanded, even varnished. I don't know who did it. Rue climbed the ladder, hammered it into place. Maudine took out a few photocopies of the HOA clause section 3.2, same one I'd quoted months ago, and stapled them to a new gate post. No graffiti, no spite, just paper. A boundary drawn with facts, not force. I wore Addie's old gloves, the ones with the tear in the left thumb she never bothered mending. When the last rail went up, Rue looked at me. "You got anything else that needs going in?" I walked to the house and came back with the tin box. The rust had been scrubbed away. Its hinge moved smoothly now. I'd lined the inside with a bit of cedar shavings. Nothing inside but air and the idea of memory. I nailed it to the final post. Low near the base, right where Addie once left treats for raccoons during winter. We stepped back. It wasn't stronger than before. Not bigger, not more impressive. Just chosen. That evening the pie tin sat empty on the porch rail. I brought it in, washed it slow. When I stepped out to check the mail, a single envelope lay inside. No return address. The handwriting was familiar. Slanted, precise. Inside the original HOA waiver Addie had submitted in 2018. The same one we'd scanned, copied, presented. But this was the original still with Eileen's signature, and now a note scrawled beside it in blue ink. I was wrong. I see. No flourish, no plea, just 4 words. I folded the paper back into the envelope and placed it inside the tin box out by the fence. Then I sat on the porch beneath a blanket that still faintly smelled of Addie's lavender soap and listened to the last nails settling in. The headline dropped just before sunrise. Wickery Hollow, HOA, President resigns. Amid internal spending probe board, accepts resignation. Interim treasurer promises transparent audit. I didn't print it out, didn't email it to anyone. It was already spreading on porch group texts and diner counters before I'd poured my first cup. By mid-morning the weather was soft. Still cold, but the kind that encourages you to pull on an old sweater rather than grab a jacket. The kind Addie would have called hiking light weather. I pulled into the lot beside the old trailhead, the one that used to just say Wickery Ridge Access. Now, a new wooden arch stood there, handmade by Franklin and sanded by Rue. Burned into the beam in rounded script, "Respect what roots you." The cider table was already up with metal dispensers steaming faintly. Someone brought hand pies. A boy chased his sister through a pile of leaves near the folding chairs. Rue waved from the little podium we'd propped on a flat boulder. "They're ready when you are." I didn't make a speech. I just stepped up, unrolled a folded paper, the one Addie never sent but had left for Franklin in that letter. I read her words slowly, letting the space between each line land where it needed to. Protect what loves you back, even if it doesn't speak, even if it runs when you come near, even if it tears up your flower beds, especially then. Silence followed, not awkward, but kind. The kind that isn't asking to be filled. Then Rue cued a short video on the projector screen he'd set up between 2 trees. Clips played fence posts being dug, Maudine wiping varnish onto the old sign, Addie feeding foxes from afar in grainy camcorder footage. The camera shook, but her laugh stayed steady. When it ended, people clapped but gently. A kind of thank you, not a celebration. Karen from Wildlife Services stepped up next, driving a small wooden post into the ground near the map box. A new plaque read, "Paws of Grace, Preserve Conservation Class 18A, Wildlife Corridor." No motorized entry. Respect nesting zones. The sound of paws on gravel made several of us turn. A girl, maybe 10, held the leash of a floppy-eared rescue puppy still too young to walk in a straight line. She giggled as it tripped over its own feet. Rue caught my eye, smiled, then nodded toward the tree behind us. "You brought it," I nodded. From my coat pocket I took the tin box. Still light, still quiet. I stepped to the hollow in the base of the sycamore where Addie used to tie feed bundles, nestled it inside. Then I stepped back. The last act wasn't loud, wasn't even noticed by many, but Rue saw. He was still watching when he asked, "You think the boars will come back?" I looked at the old ridge trail where the leaves curled but the dirt stayed soft. A new paw print had appeared in the mud near the sign too wide for a dog too fresh for anything but wild. "I hope so," I said. "Means they still believe it's safe." The hollow in the tree still holds the tin box, though now it smells faintly of cedar and not rust. Funny how something buried so long can return without fanfare, just presence. I used to think boundaries were things you built to keep the world out. Turns out they're really markers of where your care begins. And care once shared doesn't need defending. Sometimes a fight for land becomes a lesson in letting go of anger, of pride, of being right all the time. Has life ever handed you a second chance in disguise? I'd love to hear how you recognized it.